My name is Tony, and this is the story of how my world almost fell apart. At 27, I thought I had everything: a beautiful, intelligent wife, Sandra, and a life filled with love and promise. Sandra and I had agreed to wait on kids until she finished law school and settled into her career. She was driven, brilliant, and everything I could ever want in a partner. I was building my own career in tech, spending long hours at work, but I always made time for her. Sandra was my anchor, my best friend, and my greatest source of pride. She was the kind of woman who turned heads but always carried herself with dignity. When she graduated law school and landed an internship at one of the top firms in the state, I couldn't have been prouder. Her new job came with challenges and excitement. She was thrilled to work with the best, and I supported her fully. Little did I know, that decision would change our lives forever. It all began when she mentioned her first day at the firm. Sandra told me about the office, her new colleagues, and her new friend, Brenda. She also shared an odd warning from the HR manager: stay away from Mr. Eric Peterson. It sounded almost laughable at the time. Eric, she said, was the senior partner, handsome, charming, and married. She joked about how this warning was probably aimed at Brenda, not her. She wore my ring with pride, she told me, and I trusted her with every fiber of my being. That trust was something I never questioned. But what happened in the weeks that followed tested not just our marriage, but also my own strength and understanding of love, loyalty, and forgiveness. Sandra's job quickly became her entire focus. She poured herself into every case, every late-night meeting, and every project. At first, I was proud of her dedication. I admired how driven she was, how she balanced her ambition with the home we were building together. But as time passed, I noticed subtle changes that I couldn't ignore. She started coming home later than usual, always with plausible reasons: last-minute client meetings, unexpected deadlines, or out-of-town work dinners. At first, I didn't question it. I trusted Sandra completely. She was my wife, the person I had vowed to support and cherish, and I believed in her integrity. But her presence at home began to feel more like an absence. She became distant, often distracted, even when we were together. There was a heaviness in her demeanor that hadn't been there before. When I asked if everything was okay, she would smile faintly and tell me she was just tired. I wanted to believe her, so I did. There were other signs, small but unsettling. The smell of a cologne I didn't recognize clung faintly to her clothes some nights. Her phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now always within her reach. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking. But the space between us kept growing, no matter how hard I tried to bridge it. One Friday, Sandra didn't come home. She called to tell me she was working late and might stay near the office to avoid a long drive home. I told her I understood, but deep down, I felt a gnawing unease. That night, as I lay in our bed alone, the doubts I had suppressed began to surface. The next day, the unease didn't fade. I found myself replaying her words, her behavior, and the changes in our relationship. The warmth we once shared felt distant now, replaced by an invisible wall I couldn't break through. I decided to call Brenda, her closest friend at work, hoping for reassurance. Brenda hesitated before speaking, her silence heavier than any words she could have said. Finally, she told me to meet her, and she would take me to Sandra. Her voice was filled with reluctance, as though she knew what I was about to see would change everything. When we arrived at a sleek, unfamiliar neighborhood, Brenda parked the car and pointed to a house. She didn't look at me, but her hand trembled slightly as she gestured. I stepped out, my heart pounding as I approached the door. The house was quiet except for faint music playing inside. Pushing the door open, I immediately noticed Sandra's belongings scattered across the living room floor: her bag, her shoes, her clothes. I felt like I was in a dream, moving through the house in slow motion, every step taking me closer to a truth I wasn't ready to face. In the bedroom, the scene before me shattered everything. Sandra was in another man's arms, the sheets tangled around them. I recognized him instantly: it was Eric. The man she had spoken of casually, the one who seemed like just another colleague. Time seemed to stop. I stood frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. The air felt suffocating, and my chest ached with a pain I had never known. Sandra lifted her head, and when her eyes met mine, I saw the same shock mirrored there. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, without a word, I turned and walked away, leaving the weight of that moment behind me. I left that house broken. The woman I loved, the one I trusted above all, had betrayed me in the most intimate way. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing through every memory, every moment that now felt tainted. At home, the emptiness swallowed me whole. I sat in the dark, staring at nothing, replaying the image of Sandra and Eric in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to let the pain out, but all I could do was sit there, hollow and numb. Sandra didn't come home that night. She didn't call, didn't text. By morning, I felt like a stranger in my own life. Everything that had once brought me joy now seemed meaningless. The walls of our home, the pictures of us smiling, the little notes we used to leave each other, they mocked me with their lies. When Sandra finally came back, her face was pale, her eyes red and puffy. She didn't try to explain. She didn't make excuses. She just stood there, her presence a reminder of the betrayal that now defined our marriage. I didn't ask questions. I couldn't bear to hear her justify what she'd done. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of her infidelity bore down on me. We lived under the same roof, but it felt like a war zone of silence and unspoken grief. Sandra seemed remorseful. She tried to reach out, to talk, to fix what she had broken. But every time I looked at her, I saw her with him. Every smile felt like a lie. Every touch felt like a betrayal. At first, I thought I could never forgive her. The pain was too raw, the trust too shattered. But despite everything, I still loved her. That love made it harder, not easier. It forced me to confront my own emotions, anger, sorrow, even guilt. I asked myself 1,000 times if there was something I could have done differently. Was I too trusting? Too focused on work? Too blind to see the cracks before they became fissures? We started therapy, though I wasn't sure if it was for her, for me, or for the ghost of what we used to be. Therapy forced us to face the ugliness of what had happened. Sandra didn't shy away from her guilt. She admitted to everything, the attraction she felt for Eric, the way she allowed herself to be swept away by the thrill of something forbidden. She cried as she confessed how much she hated herself for what she'd done, how she wished she could take it all back. Her honesty cut like a knife. I wanted to hate her for what she'd done, but I couldn't. Part of me saw the woman I fell in love with, the one who made me feel like the luckiest man in the world. That part of me wanted to fight for us, even when it felt like I was the only one still holding on. But it wasn't just Sandra I had to forgive. I had to forgive myself, for being so trusting, so blind, for not seeing the warning signs. I had to let go of the anger and pain that were eating me alive. I had to decide if the love we once shared was worth rebuilding, or if it was time to let it go. Through therapy, we began to rebuild, brick by brick. It wasn't easy. Some days, I felt like I was making progress, only to be dragged back by a stray thought or memory. Other days, I questioned if I could ever truly move on. But Sandra was relentless in her efforts to make things right. She left her job, cut all ties with Eric, and devoted herself to repairing the damage she had caused. I wish I could say the process was smooth, but it wasn't. Forgiveness didn't come overnight. Trust wasn't rebuilt in a day. But slowly, we found a way to coexist in the same space without the shadow of betrayal looming over us. Rebuilding our marriage was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every step forward felt fragile, every step back felt devastating. But with time, the pieces began to fall into place, not perfectly, but enough for us to stand together again. Sandra and I moved to New York to start fresh, leaving behind the city, the job, and the memories that haunted us both. She worked tirelessly to show me she had changed. Therapy helped us find new ways to communicate and heal. Slowly, the trust we had lost began to return, though it would never be what it once was. Even so, I can't say that everything went back to normal. There are days when the memory resurfaces, unbidden, and I feel the ache of what we went through. There are moments when I see Sandra and wonder if I'll ever completely let go of the past. But I chose to stay. I chose to believe that the love we built was worth salvaging. Sandra carries her own burden, I know. She lives with the guilt of what she did, even as she works to make amends. Sometimes, I see the pain in her eyes when she thinks I'm not looking, and I know she's still fighting to forgive herself. Our marriage is far from perfect, but it's ours. It's a reminder that love, when tested, can endure, though not without scars. I don't share this story to paint myself as a hero or to justify staying with someone who hurt me. I share it because it taught me something important. Love is not invincible, but it is resilient. If you're lucky enough to have someone who loves you with their whole heart, don't take that for granted. Don't betray the trust of the person who would stand by you in your worst moments. Not everyone gets a second chance. I did, but I wouldn't wish the pain of earning it on anyone else. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, subscribe to my channel for insights on love, relationships, and resilience. Your support means everything. Let's learn and grow together.